All right, so we heard from the coordinators yesterday, so we got some news to talk about there. We got a release, we got a signing, business picking up, a few days away from the start of free agency as Bobby Slowik and the coordinators speak. It is the Locker Room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 Central on Sports Radio 610. What stuck out with Bobby Slowik's press conference? A few things. We didn't get a lot. But what we did get was more substance from an offensive play caller than we've really gotten in the last 9 years. The offense, going back to the beginning of the O'Brien era, has been missionary. It's been whitey-tighty. It's been stale. And the DVOA numbers show, and the eye test shows there just really hasn't been much imagination. There really hasn't been much ability to really maximize players. A lot of times, Deshaun Watson would save all butts. It was almost as if they were playing just to keep games close, and they weren't really taking the top off of defenses. Now, personnel has had a lot to do with that. That's really what it's going to come down to. They're going to have to get better players. But Bobby Slowik said that the identity, it used to be tough, smart, dependable. We still got the tough part, but we got fast, physical, tough, is what Bobby Slowik said. And he said it a couple of times. You can tell that he's a very, very big film guy. He mentioned the tape a couple of times. He mentioned fast, physical, tough. And he also mentioned precision and rhythm. So that's all good. We really don't know what Bobby Slowik is going to be as an offensive guy, but it does seem like he has some sort of idea what he wants. Fast, physical, tough, precision, and rhythm. Emotional moment for Slowik. I thought he was actually going to cry when he talked about Kyle Shanahan and the impact that Kyle Shanahan had on his coaching career. He actually said that Kyle Shanahan was a guy who encouraged him to focus on the offensive side of the rock. And he also said that it was hard to work for Kyle Shanahan in a good way. And it does seem like, for better or worse, he put a lot into soaking in every ounce of information that he could from Kyle Shanahan. Now, that's not to say that he's going to be able to call games like Kyle Shanahan. He's not going to have as much of an impact on the entire team as Kyle Shanahan, but he did get very emotional and went into detail about Kyle Shanahan. I thought we were going to have some tears, some random tears, but we did not. I also think Bobby Slowik might have got a little headline porned. He was asked about Jimmy Garoppolo. And basically what Bobby Slowik said was, we look at every free agent. Jimmy G's a free agent. So, of course, he's a part of our process. That's what he said. The headlines say different. The headlines all over. I saw a headline in Tyler. I saw a headline, I think at NFL.com. Texans offensive coordinator says the Texans are looking at Jimmy Garoppolo, which I guess you can take it, and that's what headline porn is. You can take it and present it as that. But essentially what Bobby Slowik said is they look at every player that's a free agent that they could potentially acquire, and Jimmy Garoppolo is a free agent, so they looked at it. So if you're just scrolling through Twitter, which most people do now, and you read that, you would think that Bobby Slowik said, hell yeah, we're all in on Jimmy Garoppolo. We're looking into him, of course. He really just said they look into every free agent. Jimmy G's a free agent. We look into that. I actually thought it was a good answer, but headline porn, gonna headline porn. After Slowik, we had Matt Burke, the defensive coordinator for DeMeco Ryans. He did not say whether or not he was going to call plays or not. He said that's still part of the process. He said he wanted to serve. He even said he'd be willing to fill up water bottles. I sure as hell hope the defensive coordinator doesn't fill up water bottles. I get it. You're going the hard-o. I'm here to serve and do whatever I got to do. A lot of listeners on the text line kind of rolled their eyes at that. But Matt Burke, he was also asked the J.J. Watt question. John McClain asked him that. Couldn't help himself because he worked with J.J. Watt. Really didn't get much from Matt Burke. As far as like the podium critic, he kind of bored the hell out of me, if we're being honest. I'm intrigued to see how the dynamic is between him and DeMeco Ryans, whether he's not going to call plays. We still didn't get that. But for Matt Burke, I loved the Slowik press conference. Burke, just from the podium critic point of view, kind of bored the hell out of me. if I'm being honest. We then had Frank Ross go up there, and Frank Ross, as always, special teams coordinator for the Texans. Thank God he's back. He was awesome because Frank Ross is awesome. Everything that Frank Ross does is awesome, from coaching to talking. Friend of the program, one of the best special teams units last year. Just a huge ball of energy. Frank Ross was up there. He was his normal, entertaining self. And he mentioned something that I think is good. And I think it's probably the best thing about this coaching staff, is he mentioned the youth and energy of the coaching staff. And that's a really, really good thing, because we've had here in Houston, we've had a blowhard, for lack of a better term, jerk in Bill O'Brien. And I've talked to Bob multiple times. I've drank beers with Bob. I don't think he's like a bad guy, but he's a jerk, and he can be a jerk up there at the podium, especially. But I mean, he's kind of a blowhard. He thinks he invented football. And then you went to David Culley, who's a nice guy, but let's be honest. I mean, that's like your cool grandpa that you go hang out with on Thanksgiving or Christmas. That you don't want to have too much responsibility. And then you had Lovie Smith, who's just kind of stuck in his ways. Maybe the worst of all of them in Lovie. And now you have a guy in his 30s in DeMeco Ryans with all this experience. Seems excited, not just for the opportunity, but excited to learn. And I think that's the beauty of this coaching staff, is whether it's DeMeco, whether it's Bobby Slowik, whether it's, I guess you could say Burke and Frank Ross, you're kind of learning with them. So you're committed to the process. Like the first time DeMeco Ryans makes a time management mistake, it's not really going to bother me, because I look that I think he's going to better himself because of it. If he decides that he does want to call the defense at first, and then he decides he doesn't, then we can change that process. I'm just kind of married to the game. I'm kind of married to the process and the development of DeMeco Ryans, and I'm excited by the youth of this coaching staff, much like Frank Ross was. So those were the biggest takeaways from hearing the coordinators speak. Bobby Slowik, a lot of depth, fast, physical, tough is what the offense is going to look like. Seems like he likes tape. Kind of got headline porn with Jimmy Garoppolo, and emotional when talking about Kyle Shanahan. Matt Burke, we don't know if he's going to call the defense. Kind of bored the hell out of me at the podium. Was surprised it was 24 minutes. Maybe it was just because the answers were a little bit longer, but Matt Burke kind of bored me. Again, I'm going to overanalyze here in the locker room. Number one source for Texans daily digital content. I stay doing this 10 to 2 Central on In the Loop on Sports Radio 6, and I'm going to overanalyze press conferences. I've always been that way. I've always liked them. My dad used to stay up late and watch the post-game press conferences with me during games, so that's just kind of what I do. Matt Burke bored the hell out of me. Frank Ross, just the man, the absolute man. But those were the biggest takeaways from this press conference. We also have a signing and a future cut. Scott Quessenberry is going to be back next year. I know he's kind of a polarizing guy, because let's be honest, as a starting center last year, he wasn't good. It wasn't pretty. It was kind of a tough situation for him, because Justin Britt wasn't a NFL quality starting center really his entire time with the Texans, and they brought him back for whatever reason on a 2-year deal, a confusing deal to say the least, and he only lasted a game. So Quessenberry was kind of thrown to the wolves. If Scott Quessenberry is the starting center next year to start the season, then you might just need to fire Nick Caserio. I say that because it's not going to happen. Scott Quessenberry getting thrown to the wolves last year is going to make him a better player. I could even see a scenario where they bring in a free agent next week and maybe even draft someone, and Scott Quessenberry is not even on the team. So I wouldn't make too much of Scott Quessenberry coming back, getting thrown to the wolves like he did last year. I think even Roy Lopez having to start more games than you'd like him to. It's only going to make them better players down the line, or it should. So Scott Quessenberry being a reserve center, a backup center after struggling last year, I have no problem with it. Although some people on the internet are just very out on Scott Quessenberry. You also had the news from Aaron Wilson that Reeves Maben is going to be released when the time comes. I talked about Justin Britt being a confusing signing. This one was weird. This was a 2-year, $9 million deal. I've actually talked about it on this channel. $5 million guaranteed. And this guy on a very, very thin linebacking core didn't stick out at all. This was a terrible signing from the jump. I remember when it happened, I just assumed, okay, they know something. This guy's going to be a starter. $5 million guaranteed. I had people from Detroit texting me saying, what the hell are you guys doing? That guy's not good. And you saw it, $5 million for what he did guaranteed. And it might even be a little bit more than that. More power to him. No harm, no foul. But they're definitely going to have to upgrade the linebacker position. And you got to think DeMeco Ryans, being a former all-pro linebacker, looked at that tape and said, we're paying that guy what to do what? And I got to wonder what he's thinking about Christian Kirksey as well, and how Christian Kirksey fits into this thing, because you got to think they can find someone off the streets to do better than what they got from Reeves-Maybin, and probably what they got from Christian Kirksey. So keep an eye on what happens with Kirksey. Free agency going to happen in 4 days. We heard from the coordinator. Scott Questenberry is going to be back. We got Darius Reeves-Maybin. He's going to be gone. So a couple of very bad signings. We had the Justin Britt thing. Those have been wiped away. And the Texans head into free agency with more money and more stuff to do. Big surprise for you guys on Saturday at about 4 or 5 p.m. It's going to be interactive. It's going to be a very unique chance to interact with someone. I'm not going to tell you who, but I can promise you, you do not want to miss this. Be on the lookout for that announcement. I've been resting my voice a little bit, been kind of grinding through this, but when free agency comes, we're going to hit the ball rolling. Going to go live a couple more times this week. So subscribe, like, algorithm, all that crap. Download the Odyssey app. I'm going to be on the air shortly on In the Loop on Sports Radio 610, official home of the Texans. And no matter what happens with this Texans game, whether Bobby Slowik stinks or whether he is the next Kyle Shanahan light, just remember, when it comes to the Texans, we are all in this together.